Hello, fellow nerds. Welcome to another episode of Just Us, the show where we, DNDWife and DM Eguile, dive into our nerdy adventures and share a bit of our everyday life.
That's right. From tabletop gaming to navigating life in our cozy little apartment, we're here to chat about the stuff we love and the things that make life just a little bit more fun.
Yeah, so grab a snack, get comfy, and let's nerd out together.
So today, I think this is an interesting one because it's kind of, we've already talked about the outdoor side of gardens.
Yeah.
But I think we were talking because we've kind of redone some things and now we've been trying a little bit more of the indoor gardening. But I know
it's tough though.
Right. You've been the one that's kind of been taking the forefront on the indoor plants today. And so, you know, that's kind of us, right? Like we're always trying to find new, especially inexpensive, especially in this day and age, small hobbies that we can do.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we always share. And so I think today we're going to hand it off to you to talk about indoor plants and kind of their benefits and why you loving doing it so much. I'm more of like the farmer guy. Like I love growing the plants we eat.
Yeah.
I'm very much the person where it's like it needs a purpose.
It has to do something.
If it looks pretty, but you can still eat it, it's cool.
It's even better.
So indoor plants never have quite been my thing because they're really just for looks.
Yeah, they don't really have what you would consider a super important purpose, like a fruiting tree or some sort of plant. You
Something
know,
that tastes good.
Yeah, that gives you food. But there are a lot of good benefits from having indoor plants, and that's what we're going to be talking about in this episode. We're going to be talking about how they can transform a home into something completely different, adding life, adding color, and they even have practical benefits for being in your home too. So we're going to be talking about all that, as well as a little bit of maintenance tips and giving some pet-friendly plant options so that, you know, those of us who have pets don't feel like we might be hurting our loved ones because we want some pretty plants.
Right. I mean, that's always kind of like the thought process because like on my end, we had to really look into things like onion and garlic, right? It was like, okay, those are the things we can never grow low and stuff like that. So when we started looking at indoor plants, it was like, oh, we have to think the exact same thing.
We have to be very careful, because we do have 2 cats, and as I don't know if a lot of people know, but they are not very good with things like onions or garlic. It can make them very sick.
Never feed them anything. Like, don't even let them try it.
Yeah, and we happen to grow garlic chives on our outdoor patio, so we only let the cats out there with supervision, and we put the plants in an area where it's like extremely difficult for them to reach to make sure that they don't have access to that.
Yeah, and like I'm a big outdoors person, and I think that's what you kind of took from me was this kind of, you know, I used to live out more in the wilderness or used to go out with my grandparents and stuff like that. So I think you kind of took that initiative where you wanted to bring a little bit of the outdoors indoors.
Well, yeah, it's tough, you know, when you're working a 9 to 5 and you're just coming home. You want your house to sort of give you some levity to encourage you to come back, right? You want to feel welcome in your own home. And I think indoor plants can do such a good job of doing that, just making a home more inviting, more welcoming. It just also adds that touch of color, and it just kind of brightens everything up.
Right. Like, I mean, it's an off joke, but like you and I love this SNL skit that talks about being during COVID and all that, and like she has a plant named Reggie.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's that kind of thing where, like, you know, obviously we have plants, we have cats, we have fur babies, right? But I feel like if you don't, having plants, like you said, kind of brings that life.
Yeah, it's a little extra camaraderie.
You know, we all kind of, you know, once we see something growing and see, I guess, something else in the struggle that we're all in, we just can't help but name it and then give it a personality. And I feel like that, I didn't think about it like that at first when you were kind of telling, you know, hey, we should bring some more plants inside.
And, you know, I just find it really wonderful as an alternative, especially for people who can't have pets because of allergies or whatever other reason, right? If you can't have a little fur baby to kind of help you with, you know, the feelings of loneliness, especially if you live alone, that can add up and can become a problem for you, you know? So plants are this sort of happy medium between pets and children where they require a little less maintenance, but they still provide a wonderful sense of purpose, of passage of time, and something wonderful to look at and enjoy as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was like one of the original reasons we really got to gardening too, and I think we talked about it a while ago, was like, you know, especially once you're done with college and stuff like that.
Yep.
It starts becoming hard to keep track of seasons or when things are going. But when you have this, you know, plant, especially what I'm learning now with the indoor plants is like certain flowering stages, or they might have different looks depending on their growth.
Yeah, their color might change.
So there's a lot more vibrancy to the indoor plants you brought into our apartment.
There could be. I just, you know, depends again on what you choose. We happen to have a Tradescantia in the house, which, for those of you who don't know, is a sort of vining creeping plant, and it has this beautiful, vibrant green and purple coloring on it that I just love. And if you're looking for pops of color in your home without, you know, going overboard on the decorating, that's definitely a way to add some of that color, some of that pop to your life.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it really is too, because obviously, you know, with most things you could always overboard it, but I feel like with plants there's really never, as long as you can maintain or water and care for them, I feel like it's something where, especially if you have no animals or whatnot, you can have a lot of plants and just bring so much more life.
I have seen quite a few photos on Reddit from our plants, and there's like whole rooms dedicated to house plants.
Right, and I feel like that, you know, because obviously we've been looking at house plants more. It's like even when you go to like the stores, just seeing like all the massive amounts of plants, you just kind of get a sense of already relaxation at the store.
Yeah.
Where introverts like you and me are already kind of like on nerves.
Edge. Yeah, a little bit, right?
But it's like, okay, plants, calm, relaxed, and it just seems like there is like extra benefits besides just like,
They're
it looks
pretty.
nice.
Yeah,
right. Like, it looks nice. It smells nice. It's like, no, there's probably a lot more to it.
Yeah. You know, as humans, we love to look upon and appreciate beauty, but that isn't the only thing that plants bring us. You know, there are health benefits to having indoor plants as well. So we're going to be talking a little bit about how plants can act as things like natural air purifiers. Now, we're not talking crazy like you buy one plant and automatically your house is going to, you know, have like 100% oxygen. But if you have enough plants and enough of the right type of plants in your home, you can really help out your air quality in your house. You know, where it's things like you have the filters in your home for the AC and stuff. If you take a look at those every now and then and you clean them out or you have them replaced, you can see how dirty the air gets when it gets pulled into them. So having home plants that can purify can really help.
Yeah, I know. Like, I also find that, which you obviously don't worry about outdoor plants. Indoor plants, you know, like you're saying, they get dirty too. So it's like, it kind of shows, like, obviously if the plants are getting, your filter's getting dirty, your plants, they're taking in some of that.
Yeah.
And so it is that thing, like, just like you change your filter, you gotta, you know, get a little rub, you know, a little clean job to your indoor plants. You gotta maintain your plants.
Yeah. You gotta make sure that they're ready, you know. And beyond that, indoor plants can also help reduce the stress, reduce, you know, all of the sort of negative emotions that come upon you throughout the day and promote a sense of calm and peace within you.
Right. I mean, it like a perfect example would be like, you know, big companies like Google, right? Like they have tons of plant and aqua life. And, you know, I think you go through gardens and you walk through these spaces. So obviously there's this logic behind, hey, plants are calming, they relax, just kind of breathing in that natural air. And I think the easiest ways to do that is like, you know, if you live in a city or a town and then you go camping, and the moment you get out of that car, the moment you breathe in that air, I feel like you just instantly relax.
It's just a different sort of feeling, yeah. And we know that studies have shown that having indoor plants can improve focus, improve productivity. So if you are going out into nature, you feel like you're doing a lot more just by being out there, taking a hike.
And I imagine the same could be said. Now, obviously, I work in kitchens. The plants we have, we cut, chop up, and eat, right? You work in more of an office space. I mean, how much better would it be to have plants in your cubicle setting than just having like calendars?
I think it would be so nice. Unfortunately, I work in an office that literally has no windows where we're at, so we can't have plants, and it really kind of bums me out that I can't have like a little plant or something, because it helps pass the time. And like I said, in stressful situations, you can kind of look at it and just relax a little bit. It's always helpful.
And like for me, what I've noticed too, and I'm big, like I have some breathing issues every now and then, and you know, pneumonia can suck.
It's
and
tough, yeah.
And so I also have found that it does help with, you know, we do have an area where, you know, we do get some dry summers, and that can cause me to have nosebleeds and all these other problems. But I've found that now that we have a lot more of these indoor plants, like kind of the humidity level of the house. And it's probably a little bit of the fact that there's, water beds, there's moisture in the plant bed
being gathered.
But I've noticed, especially like the setup that we have in our bedroom, and our bedroom's a very closed off space. Ever since we've gotten it, it seems that there's just kind of a better balance of kind of creating
moisture
moisture. When it gets really hot in the summer, obviously we're watering more, which means there's more moisture. It's a little easier, but during the winter there's less because we're obviously not watering so much. And I always have this problem, and we always fight back and forth, is like I don't like having the heater on. It just dries out the air. I feel like I can't breathe. But I find it a little bit more tolerable now that we have houseplants.
Well, because we don't have to heat the house up as much, because the plants, not only do they, like you said, collect moisture to themselves, so it makes it less humid in your area, but it also collects all the heat to itself too. So in moments of like extreme heat, you can feel cooler being a little separate from the plants because it's all collecting where the plants are. But in terms of cold, you can really have a nice indoor sort of ambiance without having to turn on the heater because the plants are generating a good amount of heat.
And I know, like, obviously, we've had now recently, I think we've been playing, tic-tac-toe when it comes to moving these plants around the apartment.
A little bit.
I think that's like a big thing that you were working on, was just kind of finding where was the best place for these
good
plants
spots
to go. We have a lot of weird windows where the light is very inconsistent.
Our windows do not face the way the sun goes, so they don't get bombarded by the sun or heat as much. So we can't really have plants in the windows beyond the fact that we have cats that love to climb the windows.
But I imagine, like, if you can get certain plants, especially if you have like the hanging plants, you can drape them over windows and almost kind of start creating yourself an not artificial, but a real kind of shade by the hanging vines and stuff that can hang over
a little bit of natural shade.
And so that way you can actually help use that to kind of take out some of the warmth, the heat, and insulate your house a little more just by using kind of natural blinds.
I mean, we've seen it even with the plants we have outside on the patio. They provide such a barrier for heat and moisture because they collect it all themselves. So same thing applies for indoor plants, and I think it even works better indoors because obviously it's a limited space, so you can really tell the difference.
Plus, I would imagine, certain, especially like, in our place, in the wintertime, there's so much moisture by the window. I imagine, there are certain species of indoor plants where that would probably be all the water they would even need to exist.
Love it.
So you would just really, just by strategically placing them through your apartment or your home, you might even cut down your watering needs for that particular plant.
And there are some plants that take in just the moisture of the air. They don't even need to be potted. They are such wonderful plants. So if you are absolutely someone who has to be on the go, does not have enough time to maintain plants in a long-term sort of plan, then you can really add these and just leave them to their own sort of devices, and they will take care of themselves while still adding a good ambiance to you.
And the nice thing too is that, like, also, I mean, now this is kind of hard for us because we have to take little small spaces, little tiny bowls and little pots. But, I've been to homes of other individuals and friends and family where they have kind of larger pots. And I do notice that, like, in the wintertime, those pots kind of irradiate a little bit of warmth because of all that dirt, right? So, like, you can bring almost like these little portable heaters. So in the wintertime, your potted plants throughout your home are also kind of radiating slight amount of heat, which,
super
although
nice.
Obviously when we talk about energy efficiency and energy or air purification, we're talking small percentages.
Small, yeah. We're not saying you won't have to pay an energy bill or anything like that.
Or it might save you a couple nickels and dimes or something. But it all adds up. It all kind of adds. I mean, we're D&D players. We live and die by 5%.
Right.
I mean, that's a nat 20.
A good margin,
right?
yeah.
So it's one of those things where, like, it may not be big, but it is noticeable.
And it adds up. And it also depends on the volume. So, like, sure, if you have just one house plant, obviously you're not going to get the benefits of having a few houseplants in every room in the house, and that's where our goal is, to get a couple in every room.
And always, it's like gardening. There's such an upkeep cost, and that's the thing too is. I also find that, some of these indoor plants are so finicky, an outdoor plant, as long as it's got water, sun, and heat, it's fine. But man, these indoor plants, and
They can be tricky.
And I think that can put off a lot of people in terms of not only just the maintenance, but just like if it's, the cost. And so I think you've kind of throughout the last couple of years kind of caught up some cost saving ways of,
there's unfortunately plants, not only do they take up space, but sometimes they cause a lot of litter and clutter and dirt and mess because they are plants and they live in dirt. But you can use things like using trays to catch any excess water to make sure that you're not overflowing and that you're not, constantly either running out of water or overwatering your plants to the point where it's like pooling in your home.
Yeah, and I also like it because it's like a way I was showing you too is like you can really tell when you're kind of overwatering, right? So like obviously if you're throwing so much water that tray is full, you're like, oh, okay, maybe half as much the next time. And because you really kind of like you want it where a little bit of water may come out because obviously that's a full saturation. But really, you don't need it to be causing like this whole flood out in the tray that you have for it.
Because you're not gardening outside, so you don't need to flood the entire sort of soil to do so.
I think that was the thing we saw first too was the kind of you have to be careful, right? Because the home is such a different temperature system that we were getting a lot of early mold and rot on the top just because the soil stayed
fairly wet,
all the time. And I remember that being like the first thing we were like, okay, our patio has to be watered like twice a day sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
So this was like, okay, once a week.
Maybe.
And, and that way you can really kind of conserve on kind of not only the time you put into it, but also how much water you do.
Really, because I think about half of the propagations of Tradescantia that I had made originally did end up dying off because of that. They were just the soil stayed too wet for too long in the place that I had them. And I also didn't have a good enough light to generate enough heat to dry them out in time.
Yeah, and that was a big thing, was using a much more smaller halo light versus something much larger.
Yeah, it's not going to generate as much heat.
But obviously it's I find the big thing, obviously the trying to keep effective, it's really more about selecting the plant.
Really, it can be.
Right? So it's like, you kind of pick your expense because there's some that we saw that require, this requires fertilizer every month, and this requires this to be done every month, and it requires this expensive soil. Whereas there's a lot of things like your standard succulent, right? You can take some dirt from the outside, put it in a pot, put the succulent in,
and you're pretty good.
And water it maybe once every couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And it's going to survive. I mean, these are the plants that people will take out of its roots, put it in a photo frame, and just spray it with a bottle of water.
Yeah.
And they will still survive.
There are those beautiful frames that you can do with succulents that are just gorgeous.
I see them on Etsy all the time.
Oh, yeah.
But really just shows that there are some kind of inexpensive ones to start off with. I mean, I know you love your Tradescantia, but
I do.
Would you say that that's kind of more of a little kind of middle to advanced versus
I would say it's
like
definitely probably middle.
Yeah.
It's not too advanced because Tradescantia is pretty easy to take care of, but it still does have a few things that it needs in order to stay alive and survive and look pretty for you. So it does, if you want to keep that vibrant purple color, you do need to put in fertilizer, whereas I think the succulents are great because they don't need any of that. They take all their nutrients from either the soil they're in or whatever moisture they get.
Right. And so the other thing too is like, for, watering and stuff, it's always like, well, then how do you know? How do you know? And of course, you're going to see there's tons of devices out there, water meters and hydrometers. But really, you can just take, your index finger and kind of dig it under a few inches, about an inch under the surface. Is it moist? Is it? It doesn't need to be watered.
No.
If it's dry,
you might need to add a little.
So you don't have to get all these like fancy things, check the pH and all that to start.
Not to start, yeah.
And it's kind of like you can. It's like little levels in my thing. It's like you pick the starter level, and then there's more difficult, more hard to manage, and then there's like flowering and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah.
But really, you can start with $1.
Pretty much. I mean, you could go to your local 99-cent store or Dollar Tree and get started with some fairly cheap materials.
Yeah, and so that's one of those things too is, you start talking about it is kind of the lighting situation.
That was a problem,
I know you struggled a little bit with taking care of that.
Yeah, it was difficult because originally, like I said, I started off with a small halo light, which it was I looked it up. I did my research. It's great for indoor plants, but it just didn't generate enough heat. And that's what you need, especially if you're growing indoors in an area where there isn't a lot of natural sunlight. You really need extra heat, extra light to come in.
Kind of like the basics, right? And like that's our problem in the apartment too, is that our windows don't really face the best of places.
They don't.
Or it's just too cold in our apartment being downstairs. I think that's half our issue. Like you said, it was finding warmth.
That's the problem.
You know, and so there are like, you know, a lot of, again, expensive lights. I think everything, you know, in this world now, we have so many things where you can do it for a pretty practical price. And then you can go buy like the Mercedes S-Class and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But really just a standard plant light will really get you done. You don't have to find those fancy ones with the rigs and setups. You can go down to your hardware store, pick up a plant light for like $20. That's the whole setup. And just have, you know, 1 to 2 plants, right? So I think that's the biggest thing too, is that you don't want to have too many plants.
Don't start off with
too
many,
Well, that if you just don't have enough light.
That's
and you don't want to try to force all your plants into one space, and now the poor plants are suffering to get any kind of sunlight.
Yeah, and they're fighting themselves. You don't want that. You know, you want all your plants to get enough. And so we went with a slightly larger option, and it's also a clip-on, so it's got a really good versatility for moving around if we want to move the plants.
Yeah, and you know, for us too is, you know, when you get the lighting and all that, is you can set it up on timers. We happen to use
Makes it so much easier.
You know, we use, you know, Alexa and all that kind of systems that allow us to be able to kind of time set up so that when we're not home, our lights are on, but then we're home, these kind of bright plant lights aren't just kind of blinding us. Or, you know, in the middle of the night, they click on like the rising sun. No, they start at like 10 a.m. But because the plants, because our room is so dark or apartment, that is their day-night cycle. They're not really suffering any kind of effect or anything like that. No,
they're doing wonderfully. That's another way to check is, you know, you make sure that your plants aren't drooping and stuff like that. You can always tell how your plant is feeling by how it looks, which is really nice.
Well, you know, I mean, you've been doing this now for about 6 months. So do you have any kind of general tips and maintenance hints or something that we can share as that you've learned? Because as with most things, it's always trial and error. I mean, lots of unfortunate plants are lost in the learning of how to do this.
So if you want to mitigate those losses as you're starting, the first thing I would do is just start off with 1 plant.
Yeah, that don't get too many. We failed in that a few times.
If you're making your first forays into indoor plant and indoor plant care, I would start with 1. That way all your focus can be on that one and you don't have to worry about messing up with other plants that you're handling as well.
Give it the attention it deserves.
Yeah. And plus, you're learning right now, so you don't want to divide your attention too much. I would also make sure that you regularly check the soil moisture to avoid overwatering. And I mean like daily, just to be on the safe side if you're starting
especially
out.
When you're first trying to figure out what the plant likes. And that also comes into kind of what soils you use. And one thing to notice too, and I've pointed this out too, you know, if you pour water on the top and you see it instantly drain out, that's not a good thing.
No.
That kind of means your soil's kind of not really retaining much of the water, and you might want to change it out. Whereas if you see the water kind of bubbling on the top, almost like it's like refusing,
having a hard time absorbing.
Now, obviously, if it doesn't you may have impacted soil.
Yeah, that might be a problem.
But for most home indoor plants with this fresh stuff, it just means that your soil is doing what its job is, which is holding onto the water as long as possible. And so really your soil, you know, you can use stuff from the outside. It's not a big deal. Obviously, you know, you want to clean it and make sure there's not any other kind of roots or stuff like that in it. But you don't have to go out and buy the expensive potting mixes.
No, not at all. You can use dirt from your garden. Now, obviously, you won't get the same control as store-bought you know, soils, knowing exactly what's in there, knowing exactly how many like nutrients and stuff is in there. But you can add that all post planting as well. So never feel like you have to buy a certain type of potting mix or anything. You can always start with your normal and work up to something like that.
That's always cool.
Another big thing is to clean. If your plants have leaves, Some of them do and some of them don't. If your plants have leaves, you want to make sure that they're clean, that they don't have either water or dirt, too much dirt on them. Both can cause issues with certain plants. Some plants can't take water on their leaves, and that will cause it to rot, whereas other plants can, and it's perfectly fine, but they get really dirty.
Always kind of read up on the plant. I mean, that's the glory of having the internet and being able to, I mean, usually if you can find the name of your plant, there's going to be a YouTube channel dedicated to it.
Or some sort of article showing how to take care of it. So do your research, make sure that you know what you're doing. And even if you don't have the time to do like an insane amount of research on your plant, the plants that you buy always come with a few little like info packets that show you like the basics of what they need to survive. And so that'll get you started if you don't have too much time right off the bat. One last thing is you also want to make sure that you rotate your plants ever so often for even growth, because if you leave it just on one side, the plant can eventually shift and change the way your entire planter looks. So let's say you planted a plant in the center of a planter, but you only left it there, and now it starts growing to the left, and it'll just keep growing that way, following the sunlight or the lamplight for as long as it can. And if you leave it too long, it might fall out of the pot.
Not only that, but also just like us, doing that constant bending and changing also helps really strengthen
that's true.
The base of the plant. So obviously if you're planning on this plant becoming a large vining plant, doing that a lot in its early development is going to see that base stalk is very strong.
Absolutely.
That way you don't have anything happen, like say it snaps under its own weight, which would be the most horrible thing to have happen.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there's a lot to that, but I mean, you can do everything you can, but if you have, dogs or cats, that won't make any difference.
Yeah.
And I say this with a lot of care in the sense of, okay, you always hope, plan, build, structure that your animals will never get into something.
Yeah.
It's never the plan. But they will, one way or another, find their way into your stuff.
Yep.
And so I think we kind of had that discussion of it was better to just go ahead and say, all right, let's only get stuff that we know is on top. It may not be the most pretty. It may not be the easiest to use. But let's just bank on they're going to find a way to get a snack.
Right. They're going to find a way up. Now, thankfully, my trade scontia is in a place where the cats can't reach at all.
But you never know. So that's why it was like, let's make sure before we really build this guy up, is this okay to have in our home? And this could be same to said. Now, obviously, we're all about pets.
Yeah.
This could also be said about children.
True.
So if you have pets or you have a child or relatives, you obviously want to make sure that these are something that is safe for everyone.
Exactly. You never want someone
risk it
to get hurt.
If you live alone and you have your private garden and all that kind of stuff, then you can have your private death garden.
Right. You can do whatever you want.
But it really is that kind of why risk it moment.
Yeah.
Are there any other plants? I mean, obviously we have the Tradescandia. Are there any other plants that you've come across that you are maybe interested in also bringing in once we kind of get Tradescandia kind of all locked down? The
first one is that I want to bring more ferns in. They're beautiful. They're very cat friendly, very pet friendly. So you don't have to worry about your pets, finding them, getting into them, and then you finding them in a bad position later. So that's always nice. I really look forward to ferns, but also I'm super excited for trying out spider plant.
I hear so much about that, and they have so many different variants too, which I think will be really cool.
And they like to spread out, just like the name suggests. They like to spread out. They're very resilient, and they adapt well to different environments, so they're very easy to grow. And because they're non-toxic to pets, you can keep them pretty much anywhere in the house, and you don't have to worry about, someone getting into it on accident. I think also aloe vera is a really good one.
And that's one that people aren't going to think about, right? Like you can take an aloe leaf, put that into a pot, and
it'll
let that start growing.
Oh, yeah.
And you have like us, like, it looks cool, and you have a source of aloe.
Absolutely. You can easily cut off like a little piece of the aloe and use it on yourself. That's what my mom used to do when we were growing up. We had aloe plants in the backyard, and she would cut some whenever we had, say, a sunburn or any other type of burn or an insect bite. We would always put on a little bit of that aloe vera. It would make it go right away. So that was always super fun.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that's the cool thing, is that there are a lot of different types of plants out there that, if you go a little digging, you'll be able to find the ones that are kind of safe.
Yeah.
And you always think, okay, well, the safe ones are going to be the really bland looking ones. Some of these look really cool, but unfortunately maybe require a little bit more maintenance.
Yeah, a little bit, but it's always good to do your research, make sure that you know what is good for you, what isn't, and especially always keep in mind that your pets and your children or loved ones might also be affected by your choices.
Now, obviously, we talk a lot, and that's just because our favorites are like these kind of more succulent styles.
Yeah.
But obviously, other people might want to put other kinds of what we would say more flowers, right? Now, are there any flowers that you've kind of come across that are also pet friendly and something that you might want to bring inside the house at one point?
I would love to bring in orchids.
Ooh.
They are beautiful. Anybody who's seen an orchid, they're gorgeous. They are a little difficult to grow, though, because they can be a little finicky. So that's a project for, a more advanced DNDWife. But
down the road.
But they're a great option for plant enthusiasts. They're also really non-toxic for pet owners. So again, that's another plant that you don't really have to worry about. The biggest thing you have to worry about is your cat getting into it and mangling it.
Not so pretty anymore.
Right. I really want like African violets too. They're gorgeous.
And that has a lot of variants. Like there's a lot of colors to African violets.
Oh yeah, different colors. So you don't feel like you're pigeonholed into one specific color if you have a particular aesthetic to your house and you don't want to mess it up with like a different strange color. These are perfect for that. You can find a plethora of ones that will work for you. And they're also non-toxic, so that helps.
Anything like a bigger plant or bush?
Oh, I really like this one. And I like the name too. It's so much fun. It's called a money tree.
Gotcha.
Now it's not real money.
Does it grow money?
No, I looked. No,
right.
But they look really fun. They also grow fairly large, not terribly large. Like they're still an indoor plant, but they can grow quite big and tall if you let them. And they're really great. They are believed to bring good fortune to your home.
Right. I know I know that I've heard them before as them being really steeped in tradition.
Yeah. They're not actual money trees, but they are used to sort of bring a sort of good vibe to the home to kind of maybe bring in some money.
Right.
And I just want to say the benefits of indoor plants aren't just what we see from them. They're what we get at face value. They provide so many wonderful things, from air purification to just creating a more inviting home that you feel like I'm coming home to family with.
Right.
So, yeah.
And it is one of those things where I think I stressed this with you when you first started doing that, and like when we originally tried bonsai, and we are way not ready for bonsai.
We were not ready.
That's for sure. But it was where it's like, hey, this is going to be a learning experience. Yeah. We're going to lose some, we're going to gain some, but no matter what, we're going to keep going forward. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing you don't have to be worried about. You will make mistakes.
Always.
Something will happen. You will lose plants.
Yep.
Something won't work.
That is part of it. Sometimes the plant just doesn't want to be there.
Doesn't want to go.
Yeah.
But the whole point is, it's part of the fun, getting everything going, working on it. And it gives you that sense of calm, like we were talking about, and that peace. So like you were saying, just there's the health, there's the mind, there's just so much benefit that comes to bringing a little color to your life.
Yeah, and it helps you feel needed too when you come home and there are things that require your attention because they rely on you for water, for sunlight, for sustenance. That brings a certain fulfillment to you, even if you, like I said, live alone or don't have pets to come home to. Having a plant to come home to can really just take away the stress of the day.
Oh, I know. And I feel like it is that thing where, we're getting up there. We're getting a little older. We don't have any children ourselves, but giving you something that kind of keeps you with like that life calendar you get to see go by also brings you that kind of sense of peace like you're talking. And I think now at this point, we've had now these indoor plants for, almost a year now. And at this point, I don't even think I can even think of ourselves not
without them.
Without them. It just doesn't seem like our home anymore.
No, they just provide so much, I think, beyond just being plants in the home.
But that's a wrap for today's episode. As always, thank you for hanging out with us. We hope you enjoyed diving into tonight's topic with us.
If you want to share your thoughts or nerdy hobbies, be sure to join the Couple of Nerds Discord. We'd love to connect with you and see how you're living your best nerd life.
And also, don't forget to check out the Couple of Nerds Productions YouTube channel for more content, including cool tips on space-saving living and all the nerdy crafts that we've talked about today.
Until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.
Have a good one.